Can I get a very quick show of hands to see what's up there? Who is public schools? Public schools, yay. Private schools, where are you? Wonderful. Corporate or business? Okay, cool. Just good to know the mix of who's in front of me. So my name is Derks. I work for the New South Wales Department of Education. I'm one of the learning designers, and I'm based in the head office of technology. So all the activities that kind of come out of our office are really focused around the effective use of technology in schools. The particular project that I'm working on is called STEMShare Community. Has anybody heard of STEMShare Community? Yeah, a couple of you? Okay, wonderful. So STEMShare Community, our focus is to deliver a very defined set of technologies to schools. So we're really quite particular about what we bundle into kits, and those kits then get sent around the state free of charge, so public schools can access our technologies completely free. And one of those technologies is virtual reality. And so we use the Microsoft virtual reality solution as part of that kit. So at any one time, there is up to about 600 schools that use our equipment, and so virtual reality is part of that. Today's presentation, so the slides that you'll see, they are on my Twitter profile already. So if halfway through you're thinking, oh, I wouldn't mind a copy of that, you can always go to my Twitter profile and download it from there. I'll also refer to a research report that is also linked in my Twitter profile. Who uses Twitter here for their own professional learning? Can I encourage you, if you haven't done that, Twitter is such a great space to meet other professionals, whether they're educators or business professionals, that can then encourage you and stimulate you in your own professional learning. So if you haven't started using Twitter for yourself, I really encourage you to do so. Okay, so let's have a look at virtual reality and where that's come from. You know, it's not new. VR has been around for quite a long time, and I guess the reason is that we are always so curious to have experiences that are just out of reach. Maybe those experiences are normally too expensive. Maybe they're normally too dangerous. Or maybe they are just imaginary experiences. But it seems that right back since 1930, we've been looking for ways to become immersed in experiences that aren't immediately accessible. So VR has had a bit of a history. It's had ups and downs where it's become popular but too expensive. It's become popular but too cumbersome. And right now, I think we're at a point where price, comfort, access, where all these things are now making it more widely available. And so Windows Mixed Reality, which is kind of built into Windows 10, that's now something that we're rolling out to high schools right around New South Wales. Now, when people use the phrase virtual reality, it means a really broad spectrum of things. And I sometimes have to stop people in a conversation when I'm discussing virtual reality, and I have to say, hang on, what do you mean? What experience are you talking about? So when I'm thinking about this stuff, I kind of think about virtual reality like a rainbow. There is so much diversity in it. And that rainbow at the very top might be just a simple 360 photo bubble. Who's seen those 360 photo bubbles before? Who's come across them? Yeah? And that photo bubble, you put a headset on, and just by looking around, you're suddenly in a really interesting or unique location. So I've just done some work with Taronga Zoo, and we built a virtual reality experience with Taronga Zoo using that very top level of VR, just photo bubbles. So children right in the outback can put on their headset and they can be inside the enclosure with the giraffes. And the giraffes are this close away from those kids. You know, virtual reality just makes these kinds of experiences so much more engaging. And suddenly kids have a deeper and more meaningful connection with the content that they're looking at. So that's a very simple photo bubble at the very top layer. Then if we move down, students can then create their own photo bubbles and annotate them, make notes and comments and add flat pictures. So now students are also creating those photo bubbles and sharing them in the headsets. You can do the same thing with video, but of course video is a little bit more technical, a little bit more complicated, but of course much more immersive. So recently one of our Department of Education teachers went to Antarctica, and I gave him one of our cameras, and he went snow, you know, like in a big sail, what's that called? Have a big sail, attach it to yourself, and he went kind of skiing across the snow plateaus of Antarctica, and he held up the camera and captured the 360 video of him doing that, and he sent me back the link, and it's just so, it's so cool, right? I'm literally watching one of our teachers ski across Antarctica. You know, so that's the 360 video bubble. As we go a bit deeper, we then get pre-rendered, realistic, photographed places that are real. So think of the pyramids of Giza. I probably will never go, but there are companies and professionals who photograph every angle, every nook and cranny, every texture and hieroglyph, and they then build that into a digital environment that I can walk through with a Windows mixed reality headset. And I've done that, and I come out of that headset and I feel like I've been in the Great Pyramids. I didn't just read information flat on the screen. I didn't copy notes out of a book. I looked around and saw all the stone and saw all the hieroglyphs. It was just a really powerful memory. Virtual reality creates memories in our students. And when you put a headset on, you're just surrounded by this stuff. So, but of course, that photorealistic digital space is slightly more sophisticated. But if we go down a bit further and we look at the imaginary environments that now have interactions in them. So there's a company called Realities.io that has given us their content, and they have photo scanned, I think it's the last operating coal mine in Germany. You know, the old traditional coal mines. And as you kind of teleport your way through these coal mines, you can begin to interact with objects that are inside that coal mine for me to explore that environment and learn more about that environment. So adding those interactions becomes another layer of sophistication. You can see it's now quite different to a simple photo bubble. And of course, the most sophisticated and the most immersive version of virtual reality is, of course, where it's an imaginary digital environment created by an artist with a lot of interaction and a lot of movement. Kids are now moving around the classroom in a digital space. They're interacting with objects, and the things that they're doing in this part of the digital environment change things that happen in another part of the digital environment. So the interactions become really sophisticated. The more sophisticated those interactions, the more immersive and the more powerful the thinking that goes on. At the end of the day, as an educator, I'm interested in the level of thinking that goes on inside a student when they are involved in one of these environments. So let's have a look at why I think it's really important for our students to have virtual reality access, because industry is already doing it. So I was talking to a teacher just last week and about how he's using our VR kit. And he invited an engineer to come and speak to his students about how that engineer is using VR in their industry. So for us educators, maybe we haven't seen VR a great deal. Maybe we think, oh, it's just on the horizon. But industry is well and truly adapting virtual reality tools as part of their workflow. Some examples, of course, are in medicine. You can imagine the benefit for doctors and surgeons to be able to see a digital replica of a human body and examine those arteries and organs, examine those medical conditions from above, from below. And of course, in the automotive industry, they're using it for the design process. They're using it for the quality assurance process. They're using it for marketing. In mining, when you work on the mines, it's not unusual to get training in virtual reality for how to respond to an emergency situation. Imagine you can put all those miners inside a scenario where there is a gas leak, where there is a cave-in. And then those minors have already got the reactions and responses before they go into the actual dangerous situation. This is stuff that's happening right now in industry. And our students are going to graduate into those industries and graduate into those environments. So one of my motivations to get virtual reality into classrooms is so that kids walk in and they know what it's all about. They have got their VR legs, so to speak. Of course, tourism uses virtual reality to attract people to their locations. They will offer people a virtual reality experience of perhaps skiing somewhere on the snowfields in France in order to attract you to then travel to those locations. That kind of makes sense, right? So you can see that industry is really embracing VR. Real estate is using it. I've been working with a VR company here in Sydney, and their primary business is to take the drawings from the architects, turn them into a VR model that clients can then walk through those designs, inspect those designs, and then make changes and comment on those designs. So it's really exciting that industry is moving there, and I'm so pleased to be part of a program that's helping kids get access to that. However, just because we can doesn't mean we should. When I'm looking at this stuff and exploring apps and exploring experiences, I'm thinking of classroom teachers with 30 kids in front of them, with a really difficult timetable, with assessment tasks to complete. And I have to weigh up, is there enough value in this experience to ask teachers to go on their own learning journey? Is there enough value in this to put kids into a headset, tethered to a cable? And I want to ask you that same question. If you are going to explore virtual reality, just because you can, doesn't mean you should. We need to think about the ethics of technology. So as part of STEMShare, that's one of the things that I often ask our team to consider when I'm speaking to teachers that take STEMShare equipment. Think through the ethics. One of the examples of how we're helping teachers tackle the ethics of technology is immersive versus non-immersive VR. There are two very distinct types. I could go back to the rainbow and kind of draw a line halfway through. You know, those top colors are non-immersive, those bottom colors are immersive. So this research report that came out of the University of Newcastle really honed in very clearly on the safety implications of virtual reality when it comes to young students and the safety implications for older students. So before STEMShare launched any of our virtual reality products into the classroom, we wanted to make sure that we were following the latest advice and the latest research on how to keep our students safe. Put very simply, if a student can hold the headset up and take it down with no cables, that's non-immersive. That's okay for little kids. Anyone here who teaches primary school here? Primary educators? So if you have little kids in front of you, they get very excited and they see this big, beautiful turtle right in front of them and they want to reach out and grab it. They'll obviously want to step forwards, but they don't see that there's a table and chair in front of them because they've got a headset on. So by not letting primary age students put a strap on their heads, it's one of the ways that we keep them safe. They have to hold it and they then take it down to talk to their friends, to talk to their teachers. So our STEMShare VR kits are non-immersive, and that's one of the ways that we like to keep our kids safe. If you want access to that report, again, feel free to have a look at my Twitter profile. I don't think you have to sign in to Twitter. If you just go do a Google search, Twitter, ICT Lawrence, you can see the feed that I've got there and you can download that report, okay? So, mixed reality headsets. What's the difference between that and some of the other products? And why did we choose it as an education department? So the other virtual reality headsets that are probably, I don't know if they're on display today, you will have seen that they might need a sensor or a lighthouse, and you've got to place things around the room, and there's cables plugged into those things. I'm just not going to ask a teacher to do that. high school teachers move from one classroom to another, it's just not practical. The logistics are just too difficult to set the lighthouses up and put those sensors in place. So the Microsoft solution uses something which is called inside-out tracking. So on the right-hand side, on that side, you'll notice that the headsets, they don't have sensors. They don't have lighthouses, whereas those ones do. Those ones are complex to set up. Teachers don't have time for that. These ones, you literally plug the headset into the computer and off it goes. Because the cameras at the front of the headset, they scan the room and they help map the position of the student to the physical environment around them. So that's why we've chosen to use the Microsoft Mixed Reality brand, because it's so much easier and so much more practical to set up for teachers who've got a lot of kids in front of them, difficult timetables, and are swapping from room to room. And we found that that works really well. By the time a teacher has used it, and then the kids goes, "Oh, sir, I can look after this for you." We say, "Right, great, let the kids set it up, let the kids run the hardware." So Microsoft Mixed Reality works well for us in the classroom, makes things so much easier. This is another one of the questions that I ask teachers to think about. You know, there are so many apps available, and I'll show you some of the apps in a minute, that place the student as a consumer, and they are passive as you can be in VR. So one of those apps, for example, is the Body VR, where a student can put the headset on, and they are then the size of a red blood cell. And they can travel through the circulatory system, and then after a while they shrink even smaller, and they travel inside the cell of a human and look at the nucleus and all that sciencey stuff. I'm not a science teacher. But they are a consumer engaging with this spectacular content, exposed to incredible ideas and concepts. But I don't want that to be the only VR experience that a student has. I also want a student to be a builder, a creator, a designer, a maker in virtual reality. Because as soon as students begin to make and create, they're then accessing all of that information they've learnt and using those higher order thinking skills to put something in place. So that's why I want teachers to always ask that question: consumer or creator? Or maybe it's both. Maybe it's a spectrum. A student moves from consumer and then moves over into creator. That's the workflow that I'm looking for in a classroom when teachers are using virtual reality. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the apps that we use on our kit. And I'll just show you. So virtual reality is app-based. If you don't have the app, you're not going to have the experience. Just like a mobile device that you've got in your hands is app-based, and you select those apps depending upon the purpose. So the same thing as with VR. So for example, we've got Lyra. Lyra is one of my favorite apps. It's a music composition app. Student puts a headset on and they are surrounded by these digital mechanisms that make sound. They can arrange them and connect them and put them on repeat. They can record their own sounds. They can use instruments, and they literally weave a web of music around them. It's just a spectacular experience. At the end, yes, they can hit publish and create an MP3 file that they can then share with somebody else. There's also Symmetry. This is a physics engine. It's quite a sophisticated physics tool. So instead of talking about really abstract ideas in physics, students can actually use those concepts in physics to create machines, to create cause and effect inside their digital world with almost no limitation. CalcFlow up there is a really sophisticated mathematics visualization tool. It's actually designed for university, but when I saw it, I was thinking of year 12, those really advanced maths kids that are working with complex ideas. Well, this is a way that they can visualize and manipulate those complex ideas. Epic Rollercoaster. You're thinking, Lawrence, that can't be very educational, because it is a roller coaster. It's nothing more than a roller coaster, but it's an important part of virtual reality. The reason I've included it in this list, and the reason why I tell teachers, use the roller coaster, at least for your very first experience. You know, when kids are learning something new, if it's high stakes, but the kids are entering with no skill, there's a lot at risk. And then kids aren't as free or as comfortable to explore. When virtual reality is brand new to a student, they need to find their VR legs. They've got to get used to the controllers. They need to get used to the headset. The students around them need to get used to the fact that a kid is blindfolded with a headset on. So having a virtual reality experience that's very low stakes, there's not much cognitive load, you're just sitting on a roller coaster. It gives an easy entry point where people begin to feel like, yeah, okay, I get VR now, and now I can do something more sophisticated. So I guess we're moving sort of from very simple, low order to much higher order sort of stuff. So that's why I put the roller coaster in there. I've also put a day in the life of a pirate. You know, maybe they don't want to do a roller coaster as a VR, maybe they want to do a pirate experience. Again, very low stakes. There's nothing really at risk here. Teenagers will give that a go and they won't necessarily feel embarrassed, they won't necessarily feel intimidated because they're just trying to walk around a ship like a pirate. But then on the other hand, you've got something like Tilt Brush, this dynamic and spectacular art creation tool. A new medium that I know for a fact right now, Year 12 students are using that particular tool as their major work. Does anybody here work for NSW? I need to help NSW understand how to mark some of this stuff. Vinyl reality. This is for those wannabe DJs, those students in music who they want to be on the stage and mix music together like a DJ. As you can see, there's a real range of experiences for Windows Mixed Reality. And we've been working hard at STEMShare to make these range of experiences possible. There's one more that I want to tell you about. And that's the one here called Symmetry Alpha. Symmetry Alpha for me is probably the most powerful app because it lets students bring their 3D modeling work that they might do in a computer lab. They can bring that from a flat screen into VR, and they can then walk around and inspect that work from a first-person point of view. If you've ever worked with students that are trying to understand 3 dimensions, you know, it's really quite abstract, and it takes kids quite a while to understand X, Y, and Z values and then design effectively on a flat screen. That's quite difficult. So with this workflow, a lot of our schools are doing their design and their building and their modeling in a computer lab, the whole class is doing it, and then one at a time, they cycle through the headset. They evaluate their work, and then their group might comment, because they're watching on a big screen, the group might comment about changes that have to get made. So I found that some apps have got really significant use. Other apps have got very specialized use. And as part of virtual reality in the classroom, that's one of the things a teacher does is evaluate where will this experience fit to enhance the learning for the students. One of the schools that really demonstrated to me the process of designing in the classroom and then evaluating in the headset was Greystanes High School. They were one of our first high schools to use Windows Mixed Reality, and they went through this design process that I just talked about. They had the opportunity to remodel a part of the library. And the part of the library that they were remodeling was the part that was going to become the senior study centre. So, the Year 10 kids got the opportunity to design their own study space for when they would be in Year 11. So they worked very hard on their modelling tool in the computer lab in groups and submitted a bunch of designs. And their first presentation was, of course, to the school executive. They had flat versions of the designs, but also invited the school executive to put their headsets on and then walk through those new virtual designs. The next audience for that was the PNC. Of course, PNCs play an important role in schools when it comes to funding and those sorts of things. So again, the students presented their designs, both flat on paper and in virtual reality, and the PNC could walk through those designs. They could inspect where the doors were, where the windows were, where the furniture was. And when the students were going through this design process, they realized, oh, hang on, this table is too high, or the window's in the wrong spot, or we need to move the sink over. And the beauty is that kids could make those observations as naturally as we would make them in a normal physical space. If you want to learn more about that Grey Stain story, I did kind of a 13-minute mini documentary about that. So feel free to hop onto the YouTube channel of STEMShare, and you can listen to the teachers and the students talk about the whole project. And I specifically wanted teachers to tell us what they went through, because at the end of the day, if there's no boost to the learning in a classroom, then there's no real value for us. That project is now about 9 months old, and it is still one of the most robust, one of the most sophisticated use of Windows Mixed Reality that I've seen. Yes, I love the Body VR. Yes, I love Lyra, the music making tool. But when kids can design their own environments, when they can walk through their environments, for me that was probably one of the best things I'd seen. How do I go for time? Who do I talk to about that? And we'll just keep going. All right. So what do you... SketchUp. Yeah. Yeah, so I just figured, schools have got access to SketchUp, and teachers already know SketchUp, so why not take your SketchUp files and drop them in VR? Yeah. Okay, tips and tricks for classroom management. Some very quick ideas for you. Teachers, please have a go first. Even though the experience may not be smooth sailing, 5 minutes, thank you. Even though the experience may not be smooth sailing, having a go first and you being the leader of the learning in the classroom, even though students might be comfortable, I always think that teachers, we need to be one step ahead. That's all we need to be. I have to think about whether it's a whole class activity, a small group, or an individual project, because one headset does not go far. So think about how that works in the classroom. Just like I've got a large screen that you can all look at, in a classroom with VR, I always ask teachers to have a large screen so everyone else can watch. The teacher can watch, even though the kids have got a headset on. So that helps the workflow, it helps the teacher give instructions to the student whilst they're wearing the headset. It's a really important part of classroom management. We've used a buddy system for a long time in our schools, and VR is another place where the buddy system is critical. Remember, the kid wearing the headset is essentially blindfolded to what's happening in the classroom. They don't know that a visitor has just walked in the door. They don't know that some kid wants to walk past them to go to the toilet. So having a buddy to make sure that the traffic in the classroom is managed is really critical. I would consider that one of the important strategies to keep kids safe when they're using VR. Also, virtual reality doesn't have to occupy the whole room. It can be seated, it can be just standing, it can be walking around just 1 or 2 paces left and right, but it can also be the size of the gymnasium. A student literally could use a gym to create a virtual landscape. I call that world scale. I've seen so many users put the headset on because they're really excited, and then kind of like fumbling around. Where are the controllers? And they're going, where do I put my hands? No. First, get familiar with the controllers. Where should my thumbs be? Where should my trigger fingers be? I know it kind of seems obvious, but everybody puts a headset on first. It's like, just get familiar with the controllers first. VR is quite powerful, so limit users when they're new to no more than 15 minutes. Also, don't drive. If you've been using VR for a while, it can be quite disorientating. So students who are driving, if it's the last lesson of the day, just say, you know what, don't operate any heavy machinery, don't drive until you're firmly grounded back in reality, because your judgment and perception are slightly messed with because it's so immersive. You're dealing with teenagers. Schools ask me, how do I take care of this? Just have some antibacterial wipes ready. And I've seen schools, before the kids put the headset on, here, have some wipes, clean your face, then put the headset on. I know it kind of seems obvious, but you know. All right, tomorrow, what's next virtual reality for Microsoft? So if you're familiar with SharePoint, they've got a VR version of that being cooked in the background, which I can't wait to get my hands on. That's going to be really awesome. And my next trick is to do multi-user. Imagine some of our rural kids putting their headset on, being in a class with some of our city kids, and an expert teacher delivering lessons that our rural kids could never otherwise get access to. So that's what's next. Thanks, everyone.